Avoiding mastering the major scale is a very common rut. I see it in a lot of my students, but I try to nip that in the bud the minute I see it. We're going to do that here today, so stay tuned. Hello, welcome friends to this episode of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and check out the description for all of the links from the show. With guitar students, things change on the first of the year. When the holidays are over, we're not worried about holidays anymore. Well, I think maybe you've had a couple thoughts about that. This is the year things are going to change. Well, what are you waiting for? I'm full speed ahead, and I want you to come along with me. I want you to join this momentum that we've built up. If you're over in any of my groups, you know that things are really gearing up right now. Let's get together and get our stuff together this year. And to do that, we're going to start off with what I think is the most important thing that you can master on the guitar to help you in any area. What is the DNA of music? Western music, not country and Western, but Western music. What's the DNA? Well, if you could boil it down to one simple tool that you could use to make music with, what would that be? It's the major scale. Why do people avoid this? Why do so many people want to avoid learning the major scale? For me, I think it's from day one. I remember when I first learned some open position scales. I think it was in G, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was The Saints Go Marching In. I've heard other people say Ode to Joy was the first song that they learned using the major scale. That's our intro to that. These are not the songs that most people want to learn when you get started playing guitar. They're great songs, fantastic songs. Glad I know them, but they weren't what I wanted to play when I first started. So I did what they asked. I learned the major scale. I learned it in open position, and I tried everything to get the sounds that I wanted from this scale. I would try the TV shows. I learned the Flintstones with it. I learned the theme to Woody Woodpecker. I learned anything I could, but it wasn't what I wanted to learn. And then in the back of my mind, it wasn't conscious, but it was definitely there. I thought, I'm going to avoid this scale because it's not what I'm looking for. And I kept looking for other things. Of course, you know where I ended up. At the minor pentatonic scale. And at that point, I was like, I'm done with that. I'm just going to get the minor pentatonic scale and I'm good to go. It's like saying I want to drive on the highway. But let me tell you something. I am not using a car. Not going to. I'm going to drive on the highway, but I'm going to use a skateboard. What do I mean by this? Well, I think some of us here, and I did this myself, I think some of us here are making a big mistake by avoiding the major scale. Let's talk about it. The major scale is not the cool kid at all. The major scale is not the cool kid. The major scale it's the kid that everyone cheats from in school, right? Major scale is keeping the rest of the class from failing. He's not staying out till 3:00 in the morning. He's not out partying and dating and all that kind of stuff. He's not wearing leather jackets, sunglasses. But even though the major scale, he may be wearing corduroy, turtleneck shirts, and sweaters, he is getting the job done. This is the person who knows what's going on. It's how things function. We need to take a different look at the major scale. And just because it's not cool, it is the thing that is going to help you the most move forward the fastest. So let's talk about that. Why is the major scale so important? Well, it's the reason that the things that you like to play sound good, sound great. It's the parent to all of these other sounds that you hear. And if you understand how to use the major scale, if you master it, all these other things that you want to do, they start to make sense. I started learning things from tab and just trial and error listening to songs. The problem was I could play them. I didn't know why they worked. For years, I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was doing. I was mimicking. I was trying to sound, and that's a good place to start. Mimic, try and get a little bit of that sound there so you can say, okay, at least it's in my head. My fingers played it and I hear it. But being able to take those sounds and do other things with them, to use them in all of your playing, to be a musician and use these sounds, that is the thing that's going to get you going the most. Let's talk about it. What can you do about this right now? How can you go ahead and start working on the major scale in a way that sounds great and in a way that you're going to not leave it, not spend a little bit of time working on the major scale and then go, okay, that's enough. It's something that's worthy of your daily practice. So how can we do that? How can we ease ourselves in there? Let's start with the major pentatonic scale. Okay, pentatonic. There's that word. All right, I can handle that. That's I love the minor pentatonic. The major pentatonic, I've used a little bit. That's the one that sounds a little more country, a little more folk. You'll hear it in, like Southern rock, those sounds. If you just go up and down the scale, it sounds like My Girl. I'm actually going to switch to the key of D because that's what our examples are in this week. So in the key of D, the fourth is F, and the seventh is C sharp. So D, E, F sharp, A, B, D. And we add in the F and the C sharp, and you have the full major scale. So not that different between the two, but definitely a different tool. The licks I play in major pentatonic are not the same as the licks that I would play in the full major scale. Hear the difference? Major pentatonic, full scale. Very, very different. And I use them in different situations in different songs. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take that major pentatonic. How you get your major pentatonic? Well, you play your minor pentatonic, but in pattern 1, but instead of starting on your first finger, let's see, we're in D, so that would be B minor pentatonic is the same as D major pentatonic. We just start with our pinky and go from D to D using the same scale. There we go. Super easy. Take that first scale that you learned, that minor pentatonic pattern 1, slide it into position so that your pinky starts on the D, which is the 10th fret of the E string, and go back and forth. Now you've got your major pentatonic. And we're going to start adding the 4th and the 7th. So for this one, if I start on the low string with my pinky, go on the A string for 7th fret, 9th fret, and then 10th fret on that A string gives you your 4th. And then when we get to the G string, the 6th fret going into the 7th gives you your 7th. Very, very common sound. You've heard it a million times before. We're going to find some major songs that use the major scale, songs that you like, and we're going to jam with them. What's your favorite major song? Mine tend to be from the Allman Brothers. You're going to just put those songs on and play. Turn them on, get your guitar, play along with them, and go up and down the major scale till they match, and listen to how they use the scale. These are songs that aren't the nerdy kid in school. These are great songs that use the major scale. And the more you can master those, the more you can learn those songs, the quicker you're going to get these intervals into your head. How are we going to do that? What's an easy way we can master the major scale and be able to use it to jam across songs? We are going to see it in everything we do. What? Yes, we're going to see the major scale in everything we do, no matter what we're playing. How do you do that? Well, check out this simple trick that's coming up that I'm going to help you master the major scale. How are we going to do this? How are we going to master the major scale without dealing with all the scale patterns and all of the confusing things that take a long time to learn? How are we going to figure this out? What we're going to do is we're going to do a little Yoda. We're going to unlearn what we have learned. Let me ask you a question. What do you see when you imagine a major scale? Just think about that for a second. Some people would think of a scale chart or positions, the typical things that you find when you type that into Google. Some people think of the major scale as the piano keys, which is a good way to think. It's all laid out nicely, much easier than the guitar does. But I want to show you something. I want to show you how I picture the major scale. Here it is. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, or WWH, WWWH. When I think of a major scale, that's what I think of. What does that mean? Well, whole step means 2 frets. Half step means 1 fret. So what is this? It's the spaces between the notes. It's not the notes themselves. You see, the keys can change. You can play in D, play in G, it doesn't matter. But do you ever notice that things sound super similar, even if they're not in the same key? The sounds stay the same. Think of this as a formula rather than that scale that's not the cool kid in class. Think of it as E equals MC whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. This is a gift for you. This is a gift from the governor at the last minute. It's your key to get out of the rut that you've been in for so long. It's a formula that I use to get what I want in music. It's really a tool. And once you understand the major scale, you start to progress, and your progress speeds up exponentially. And that's what I want for you. Chords, scales, modes, harmony, melody, it all boils down to this formula. Everything that we look at in music, it's either a different use of that formula or it's slightly changing that formula to get different sounds. It's very interesting. Sometimes we go down the wrong path. We learn things out of step, or we're guided in a different direction. You think you're doing the right thing. You're working hard at it. You're confident while you're doing it, and then the results don't come. And then you realize, hey, maybe I might have wasted a lot of time. Think of it this way. You start to learn scales and patterns are put in front of your face. We learn a scale pattern. We play that pattern. We go up and down. And basically, after a little bit of time, we start to feel bad. We start to feel very bad. Why is that? We don't want to sound like we're playing scales. We want to sound like we're playing cool licks. We want to think like we want to sound like we're playing cool melodies, things that move people, things that people think are cool. So by having those scale patterns thrown at you, yes, you're doing something. Yes, you're getting those sounds, but you're not dealing with the way they're used correctly. When you learn to read, do they throw paragraphs at you? No, they don't throw paragraphs at you. You start with at, two letter words. You learn those words and then you put them together in small phrases, then eventually to small sentences, then to bigger sentences. Then you start putting sentences together. You start small. And as you start to put those things, you get more difficult as you can handle it. I think that giving people who have no idea how to use the scale and giving them all of the scale patterns is a little like asking someone to make a paragraph when they don't really know how to spell a word. So when we talk about this, the whole, whole, half, whole, half, we're talking about distances between a collection of notes. So a major scale is really just a collection of notes, and we separate them. The formula separates them in a way that gives them a group identity. They have a sound. when we separate them with these distances. This is the beginning of understanding something very important. Intervals, distances between notes that have a certain quality. You hear it all the time. You just may not know that you're using it. These are your colors. This is your painter's palette, intervals. And as we separate all these notes in the major scale, each one is an interval between each other and in relationship to all the other ones. They have different sounds. So what we're going to do is, instead of learning a scale pattern, we're going to take the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and we're going to use it on one string and build this scale. We're in the key of D today. Okay, so I'm going to start on the 3rd fret on the B string. That's a D note. We're going to go a whole step. That's 2 frets away. And we've got our E, and then another whole step. It gives us an F sharp. You know, in the beginning, you don't want to play sharps and flats. You don't want to worry about that. But this formula puts the right ones in where you need it. Now we're going to go half step to G, a whole step to A, another whole step to B, another whole step to C sharp, and then a whole half step to D. And we're going to give them a number. 1, 2, 3, 4. On 4 is where our half step is. 5, 6, 7, and 7 going back to our root note, our tonic note, is a half step right there. So very familiar. Go ahead, do that now. One string, make your major scale. When you discover something on your own like this, instead of me telling you exactly how to do it, I give you a starting point and a formula, and then you find the notes right here. When you do that on your own, it tends to stick in your mind. It becomes very solid. You're not just duplicating what someone asked you to do, and like tab, just like a player piano, do this exactly right. You're having to figure things out. It sticks better in the memory that way. It's a great way to get started. Okay, so now we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, which is the octave, which is the same as 1. And we have our whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step in between each one. This formula is starting to work, and now we're in the key of D. I'm going to start to show you something that I'm going to take this formula and start to make some licks with it. Okay, so we're going to play over the D chord for 2 measures, and then the G chord for 2 measures. I put this track on, and I came up with something I thought sounded pretty cool. So next time it goes around, I'll play you what I came up with. 2, ready, go. Okay, so up and down the string, we had 8. We'll take a look at this tab right here. What I did to make it sound cool with that is I used some drone notes, a D drone note over the D chord, and then a G drone note over the G chord, just the root notes of the chords. Really not a big thing, but here it is all on one string. 8, 10, 7 on the B string, and then we have 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 10th fret, and then we finish off with 7th fret, 12th fret, 10th fret. All these are on the B string. These are all the notes that we figured out. Nice melody. It sounds great with those chords. It's a lot of fun. So what I did was I said, okay, now that I can do that, that's a lot of jumping around on the guitar. I'm going to figure out how to play those in one place. I took a look at each of the notes that I've played on the single string, and I challenged myself to find them in one position where I didn't have to move my hand around so much. It was a great challenge. Turned out where I did them is in pattern 2. By doing that, by challenging myself, it was a great way to be introduced to where these notes sit in the patterns in a way that I'm going to remember. Oh, that's when I took my whole, half, and figured out where all those notes sit in a certain place. Here is the melody played in that position. 12th fret on G, 10 on the B, 11 on the G string. And then we're going to play 11, 12 on the D string, up to the 10th fret on the B, and then 11th on the G, and then 12th on the B to 10th on the B. How about that? So I took the notes on one string, I challenged myself to play those same notes in a certain pattern, really building some strong pathways in the brain to remember these kind of things. And then I thought, well, that's great if I'm a lead guitar player, if that's what I want to do. But what if I didn't care about that? What if I just wanted to play rhythm? How could I have this work for me too? So I thought, how can I do something similar with rhythm guitar? Take the ideas from going up and down the B string with my whole, half, those ideas that I used, and maybe make a cool rhythm part out of it. So the key of the song is D, and the two chords are D and G. So the first notes in the lick, G, A, and F sharp. I'm going to concentrate on the G going to the F sharp there. I'm going to leave the A out, but I can do that right in position with a suspended chord. Here I'm getting the essence of that sound from that melody. And then when I go to the G chord, we were hitting the 2nd fret on the B string. That's a C sharp. Well, I'm going to start with that. And I climbed as I'm playing the G chord. So it's C sharp, D, F sharp, G. So the whole thing together. So there's a rhythm part that sounds a lot like what I came up with on the one string. I took the ideas from it. So here I'm going to play that rhythm part over the song here. Let's see what it sounds like. So what I'm hoping that you take from today's podcast is that we boiled down a difficult problem that doesn't sound good into something simple. And it was easy to get something that sounded great, that really worked over the chords. I wasn't worrying about what pattern I was playing. I wasn't overwhelming myself with whether I was playing it right and all those kind of things. I was just going up and down, whole, half, whole, half, freed my mind up to be able to make music, came up with something simple that sounded good. And then I could go around the guitar and make it more difficult, put it in different places. But that musical idea was there first by keeping things simple. Thank you for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. Make sure to hit the button below to subscribe to the show. And if you have benefited from this podcast, please leave a favorable Apple Podcast or iTunes review. It's the best way to make sure we get this valuable content to more guitar players around the world. And if more help, structure, and results in your playing sound good to you, join me over at the Academy. You can get part 2 of this lesson, and it's the most exciting, carefully planned guitar system. Together, we will build our online home base for guitar together. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode.